one thing I wanted to sort of divert to briefly was rugby league, because obviously you've got a proud background with the NRL, as you mentioned already. What's the general state of rugby league globally? In in England at the moment, I think there is a struggle there. There's all sorts of chats about the introduction of IMG and sort of different structuring with that. What's sort of your take on the game of rugby league as a whole?
Well, rugby league in Australia is doing well. Okay. It's nowhere internationally, and everybody knows that. They're going to try playing the game up in Los Angeles. Not Los Angeles. Where is it being played? They've got a game being played. The gambling capital.
They did it. England played the Kiwis in the States a
Yeah,
while
but
ago. Good crowd,
playing,
then it just disappears, doesn't it?
They're playing an opening game of the NRL this season in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
It's actually most likely a more fan-friendly version of rugby because it's easier to understand than rugby is. So it'll be interesting, but I don't think they're about to go and take the United States by storm. Because look at football in the United States, taken 50 years to get to where it is, and it's super easy to understand. But you're competing with the NFL and baseball and basketball, the NHL. I mean, so. And rugby thinks that it's going to actually make a huge difference just because they're having a World Cup there and because they've got the MR. I mean, it's not going to major MLR. So I think I got myself a little bit sidetracked there. Can we go back to the original question? Oh no, we're talking about rugby league. Okay.
Rugby league in England, I think I would say, especially because you touch on it at international level. I don't believe it'll ever grow. And I think they're very naive also in terms of trying to introduce. We saw the franchise in Toronto and stuff. It's worked fairly well with the Catalan Dragons, but there's a lot of money being thrown at that cause. And I'll give them the due with that. Internationally, I think it's a bit of a write-off. It has been refreshing to see the Islander sides do a little bit better in the Rugby League World Cup. That's not surprising. I think rugby league is probably more suitable to the Fijian way, so that's been refreshing. But on an international sense, I don't think it's ever going to be.
So Tonga and Samoa as well, because they're generally big, and can be fast as well. So but the rugby league in England is an interesting thing, right? So the game was taken over by Super League. They retained the title Super League. Now they're essentially being owned by IMG, and so they're always prepared to give their future off to somebody else's hands instead of taking control of it themselves. Now you take the Bradford Bulls, which I know is a team that you support, right? Now they're in the second division or whatever, the championship, whatever it's called. And that's absolutely appalling, because I always like watching the Bradford Bulls crowd, and they were up and about all the time and bully and all that sort of thing.
Mania, it was known as Bull Mania.
Yeah. And if they read this or watch it or whatever, I'd be more than happy to have some discussions with them about their future, but also the future of Super League, for crying out loud. Rugby league in the north of England is huge still. When I was running Welsh Rugby and the Millennium Stadium, our best crowds that we ever had were the rugby league crowds when they were playing at Millennium Stadium in the Challenge Cup final.
Magic, of course, yeah.
You remember when Wembley? Well, I mean, they were better than rugby crowds. They'd come, you didn't have to separate them. They were so well behaved. It was all camaraderie, even with the fans from the other teams. They were by far and away the best people we ever had with a rugby league.
So the Challenge Cup finals were at the Millennium Stadium for a while, weren't they? And there were some very good ones as well. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm talking about the fans and their behavior and their support. And the fact that is, you go to a game of football, how many women do you see at football matches? Versus how many women would you see at those Challenge Cup finals? Huge numbers. Support. Rugby league. So I get so frustrated, as you can tell, because it comes down to administration. And unfortunately, in so many sports, and not in American sports, because they get it, right? Because they know if they take their bloody eye off the ball, foot off the pedal, they're in trouble. So they don't. So they're inventive. They stay up to date. But rugby league could get back to where it should be, especially in the north of the country where it all started, and for very good reason. And I'm a northerner, even though I don't sound like one. If I stayed there, I'd sound like you, but I don't.
That's a relief for you, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, but all these people have to do is reach out and ask.
Yeah.
But they're often too not much in the receiving mode. They're in transmit mode. And I anyway.
I would be grateful for someone like yourself to come in and turn the Bulls around. I really would. But I'll go for one final question related to rugby league and rugby union before we move on to the 11s. We've got an upcoming Lions tour and Rugby World Cup in Australia, and I do worry about the quality of both of those from a Wallabies perspective. Could there be any opportunity for the Wallabies to do some shopping in the NRL? We saw at the 2003 World Cup the likes of Takiri, Rogers, Wendell Sailor. Could that be a saving grace for the Wallabies, or would it just not be something that the NRL guys would be interested in anymore, really?
Well, it's actually worse than that for Australian rugby, because they recently spent $4.5 million over 3 years enticing one of their own products back from East's Rugby League.
Roosters fullback, is it? Yeah.
The Roosters wing and Suwali and the guy that was an absolutely disaster as the chairman of Australian Rugby, who got sacked, was sprouting about how rugby was going to take all these rugby league players. Well, rugby league, which has got a few more dollars in the bank than Australian rugby will ever had, decided, nah, okay, you want to fight? Let's go. And then they just sort of said, well, we'll take some rugby players. We won't let any of ours go. Well, you can have Suwali. He hasn't really set the world on fire. He'll come back to rugby league, is what he said. But in the meantime, we're just going to take these of your players, and you can't stop us because you haven't got enough money. Right? So they are not going to be able to get any rugby league players other than has-beens to play for them. And they are going to have to be very careful that they don't lose a whole lot more players, because rugby league's determined that they'll show them who's the boss. Right? And that's as simple as that. And it is flawed. It's been flawed for a long time. Rugby in Australia is fundamentally on its knees, financially and in terms of participation numbers. And if it weren't for the Islanders that are playing rugby, the game would be almost gone. They're the ones that are
Islanders are influencing the Wallabies side now, isn't it?
Now, absolutely. So, but they've just lost a couple of those Islanders to rugby league, because rugby league, can offer them what they want, really, which is money. Yeah. So the idea of playing internationally, when you're looking at, let's say, a couple of $100,000 per year for you and your family, it's an easy decision, isn't it?